Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas, on Wednesday, July the 18th, and welcome to our video commentary. Well, we've been hearing a lot about changes in Cuba, and in fact, there are no changes in Cuba going on. It's quite the contrary. I think they're doing a lot of window dressing, but at the end of the day, it's still the same Communist Party. Now, they are making some exceptions for private property. They're saying that Cubans can now own private property, but it's really very much under the control of the Communist Party. Now, the objective of this rhetoric and all this publicity, of course, is to get more foreign investment in Cuba. Cuba desperately needs foreign investment. Up to now, the kind of investment that they've received is basically hotel companies that will go to Cuba and do a joint venture with the Cuban government and run a hotel. They bring in tourists and they basically run the hotel and they split the profits with the Cuban government. But that's been beneficial primarily to a small group of Cubans, the elite members of the Communist Party who participate in the ownership of these hotels. It really has not been very good for the Cuban people, nor has it been very good to generate economic activity. What they need to do is attract investment like any other country does, so that you build a factory, so that you have a distribution company, so that you have retail stores and so on, because are the kinds of businesses that actually create jobs. But it's very difficult to do that kind of investment in Cuba for two reasons. The first one, it's still a communist country, so there are all kinds of restrictions on investment. You're going to have to be in business directly or indirectly with the communist government. So, who's gonna invest on that basis? I mean, you have to be you have to think twice about it before you go into business with the Cuban government. They're going to have the control and you're not. The other problem that they have, and this is something that is getting more and more complicated. You may remember we did a show with our friend Jason Poblete, who's an attorney in Washington, D.C., and we did a show about the claims against stolen property in Cuba. Lots and lots of property in Cuba was stolen by the Cuban government against American citizens. I'm not talking about Cubans like me or my family. I'm talking about U.S. citizens who had properties in Cuba, and those properties were basically expropriated, and those Americans were not paid anything for those properties, and many of them had filed claims, and over the years, of course, the claims just sat in the courts. But it's beginning to pick up a little bit more speed right now, and in fact, there's a case, a very recent case, where there's a family in Florida who is suing the Cuban government for using a property that they had in Cuba to attract investment. So you're basically negotiating, or you're doing business with stolen property, which is, of course, a very difficult thing for any person to do business. You go to Cuba and you think that this building is free and clear, and then you learn when you come to the United States that somebody's filing a lawsuit against you because you're using their property without compensation. So that's the other problem they have. They have a problem of property law because for so long Cuba operated outside of the most basic concepts of property law. They just expropriated all of that property from U.S. citizens, as well, of course, as Cubans like me and my family and so on. So this is all going to make it very difficult, frankly, for Cuba to attract investment. They will probably continue to do okay with the hotels because they have a market there with tourists, but that's not going to create any jobs. So change is going to have to come to Cuba one way or the other. And so far, they're just kind of like tinkering with change, but eventually they're going to have to go the distance and simply accept private property, but not only private property, but also respect for property law, which is, of course, private property is an essential ingredient of any economic activity. We have all of these videos over at YouTube. We also have them on Twitter, and we also have them on my blog. And if July 18th is your birthday, have a happy holiday. Bye-bye, everybody.